Greetings, traveler. Have you ever wanted to play Dungeons & Dragons but realizing you don't know enough people who already play D&D to be able to invite to join your game? I certainly have been in that situation, and today what I want to talk about is how I found it easy to invite first-time D&D players to join the game even if they have never played D&D or anything similar ever before. My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 14 years now and playing Dungeons & Dragons for about 30 years now. And in my time, I've played D&D with about 100 or so first-time players who had never done anything like this before. So to give you a bit of context, back in the day when I was, I think, 15 or 16 years old, I wanted to play, but I was barely getting into the world of D&D. I was discovering all the different rules and classes and so on. And in my community, in the people I knew, there was nobody else who had ever even heard of Dungeons & Dragons. So I really wanted to play. I knew I needed a group to play together with, but the most available people to play with were my friends and my sister, to put at least 4 players together and me as the dungeon master. So I would have, back then I wanted to invite them, but because they had never played before, I just didn't know what I could say to them to first introduce the game to them, let them understand what the fun and what the appeal is, and then actually sit down and have a game together. So back then what I did was I first of all realized I had to separate my approach, talking to my 3 guy friends and then talking to my sister. So the reason why I had to separate my approach was because my friends were already gamers. In that sense, they were already playing computer games and board games and stuff like that. But my sister basically had never played any computer games or board games for any amount of time. Maybe she had tried this and that, but she had never played anything for a long time. So what I did was basically try to explain Dungeons & Dragons to my guy friends as if it were essentially a video game. I would say that this is how you usually play video games. This is the kind of world that exists in video games, and because Dungeons & Dragons offers all these extra options, it's a fun game to play. That seemed to convince them enough to at least give it the first try. And for my sister, saying that this is similar to video games, I knew wouldn't mean anything to her because she hadn't played that much to begin with. So I knew I had to try a different approach, and the approach I tried was, well, you like all these books and movies. Imagine if you could write a story or participate in a story that the protagonist was you or your character in that case. Then you could shape the story and you could have it be about anything you want, and you can take your own decisions in the story and so on. So that approach worked both with my friends and with my sister, and that's how I basically got together my first D&D game ever back when I was a baby DM. So today I want to break down those 2 approaches, the let's say gamer approach and the non-gamer approach, I suppose, when trying to find people to join the D&D session. So starting with the gamer approach, usually what I try to think is what sort of games that person plays. If it's something RPG, fantasy-esque already, then the conversation becomes very easy because that's very close to what Dungeons & Dragons is. If it's not like that, and if it's something along the lines of, shoot 'em up game or any other type of game, basically, I try to ask specifically what their favorite game is. And then I try to build a bridge between what their favorite game is and what Dungeons & Dragons offers. Some examples might be, let's say they play a strategy game. So in a strategy game, you control lots and lots of units, typically, so that's not that similar to Dungeons & Dragons because you typically only control your own character, but you can relate to the role of the general in that sense. So what if your character in Dungeons & Dragons was the general of an army and he has to go on this quest or find this resource or perform some great task to convince his army to move forward, for example, or to come together. That could be an angle to take to show the common ground between the two games. If it's a racing game, then you can say that this person wants to be the best racer, but he needs to gather money to purchase his his car or his horse or whatever he uses to race with, and that is his quest. So now we're basically going through his backstory, and of course there can be racing in D&D if you want to as well. And basically, no matter what kind of game that person likes, it's pretty easy usually to draw a comparison between what you typically do in that video game and what the character will do in Dungeons & Dragons. Another interesting approach to take is if that person already likes RPG and fantasy games, then you can say that in that kind of game you have some options, but those options are very limited compared to the crazy amount of freedom and options you have when you're playing Dungeons & Dragons. So in most video games you have a selection of 10, 20, 30 classes, whatever it might be. But in Dungeons & Dragons you can do whatever you want. You can play this crazy class, you can have this crazy weapon, you can fight monsters that are not available in video games, you can go to worlds that are not available in video games, and you can take actions like climb the roof of a house or pull a prank on the town mayor or whatever. There's so many more options in Dungeons & Dragons compared to the rigid and set world of video games. Following this approach usually gets the person to understand what the appeal of Dungeons & Dragons is, and at least they will be interested enough to see what this strange new game is that has all these options and all this amazing world, and you can tell these stories that have the branching paths and consequences, and so on. Which brings me to the second type of player, the player who has never played not just D&D but any games for any amount of time. So being a gamer ever since I can remember, I thought that no, surely there has to be people who there can't be people who have never played a game. But in my experience after all these years, I can definitely promise there's plenty of people who have never even touched a game, a board game, anything of the sort. So for people like that, relating Dungeons & Dragons to a movie or a book is usually much easier because virtually everyone has read books in school and watched movies in their off time. So what is the appeal here for a person who has done these things to give a try to Dungeons & Dragons? Freedom again is another angle you can take in this conversation. You can say that, well, in a book or in a movie, everything that happens is predetermined, right? No matter how many times you watch the movie, it always has the same ending and the characters take the same actions. But what if you could make it so that you could change what the characters do? How many times have we watched movies and we thought, why did the main character say that? Or why didn't he simply punch the bad guy while the bad guy was giving his "I'm so much stronger than you" speech to the player, to the protagonist rather. Also, another angle to explore in this is when the player can imagine themselves as a character in the story, then the story stops being about the protagonist in the movie. It becomes about them. So you don't have to take the same concessions that the main character in the movie takes. This game of Dungeons & Dragons can be all about you. So your motivation, your personal quest, your character can look like anything you want. And you can get to explore a story that this time is about you rather than about somebody else out there. And most people are typically selfish, so they like the world revolving around them versus, about some character in a movie. So again, this is another way that I found that gets people interested in this collaborative storytelling exercise and fun little game, and it at least gets them interested enough to try for the very first time to play D&D if they've never played before. So to bring it all together, using this technique, using this approach to find and talk to and recruit players for my D&D games, I've had more than 100 people to say they're interested in playing and follow up with playing the first session with me, either with an entirely new player group or with a group that's mixed. So some people have played before and some people are entirely new to the game. And as a note, this is not just for younger people, it's not just for teenagers or anything like that. I've used this exact approach to recruit even people who are, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old to play together with me, and it's not changing at all my approach to talking to them, introducing the game, and then asking if they want to play. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a more senior person like that, exactly the same technique, exactly the same approach. That person was also in a mixed group, so there were some older people, some younger people in the group, and this approach works just as well in that environment too. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope this approach helps you, traveler. If you're finding yourself in a situation where you really, really want to play D&D, but there's just nobody who even knows what that means around you, then one of these two approaches will hopefully get people understanding what the appeal of D&D is and get them interested in playing together with you. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have fun.